Welcome to So Very Easy. My name is Laura, and today let's talk about bias tape. Now, bias tape can be used in sewing and in quilting. We can buy it pre-made in packages, and these type of packages are designed more for sewing. However, we could use them for quilting. You can also get a thin bias tape with a fusible on it, and this is used a lot for quilting, but you can always make your own. And to make your own, we can get these little bias makers, and if you want to make it fusible, you can fuse them all at the same time. Let me show you how. Bias tape is fabric that is cut on the bias. So we have the grain lines going on the angle. And that gives that fabric some stretch so we can move it into different shapes. You can buy packages that have a flat fold, and you can buy it double folded, which means it's folded and then folded one more time, so the fabric would sit right in this channel. These are used a lot in sewing for putting up hems and covering seams. If you're looking for a narrow bias tape, you can get it already pre-fused. So you can get it in this box, and it comes in this roll. It's taped together so it doesn't fall apart. And then when we open it, you can see that we have that fusible web right there on that thin 1/4 inch tape. Now the containers are designed so the tape comes out of the center. So we can cut open this little tab, and then we can put this roll back into the box. I find it's easier if you leave it on the counter. Pull one end through, make sure that's nice and tight, and then slide it right back in. It's going to stay nice and tight so it doesn't unravel, and we're going to be able to take the end right here. Now if that end pokes back in, just take a pin and pull out that first layer, and it's just going to come right out. So now this is going to be easy to use, and it's not going to unroll on me. Now having these pre-made for us definitely saves a lot of time. However, we might not be able to get the colors or the size that we want, so we're going to be able to create our own. And there are tools out there that will actually help us do that. There's two different types. There's one type that's going to fold that fabric for us, and at the same time we're going to be able to put in that fusible web. If you're not going to fuse them, you can get it without the fusible option, but you can use the fusible without the fusible web. I'm going to show you how to use both of these. To use the bias makers, it is recommended that we cut the fabric on the bias, and that has the most stretch. Now, of course, we can cut on the straight of grain if you know that that strip of bias tape is going to not need to bend. But the bias works great. So we need to cut some bias strips. I'm going to cut a strip at a 1/2 inch so that I can use this bias maker. This is a 1 inch cutter, so I'm going to use a 2 inch strip. So that 1/4 inch needs a 1/2 inch, that 1 inch needs 2 inches. Now let's go to the iron and I'll show you how quick and easy it is to use these makers. And it doesn't matter the size iron, I just like the small one. So let's start with this 2 inch strip that goes with the 1 inch bias maker. We have a top channel. That top channel will fit a fusible tape. So this is an iron-on tape. It has that glue on one side, the paper on the other. That's going to fit right in the top channel. You can see how well it fits, so it's not going to move. The fabric is going to go along the back. I like to take this piece and just give it a little bit of a head start by folding the two pieces so that they come together in the center. And just give a little press right there. I'm going to take that tape out so I can show you how this works. This fabric is going to go through that back channel. I find if you have your fabric starched and pressed, it really goes through quite easily. But you do have an opening in the back where you can use a stiletto or a pin, just help that fabric come through a bit. Now I can line that up And I do like to make sure that my start has that fold, and then just put a pin to hold those edges down. And as you move this, you can see where it's going to make that fold for us. So if you do not want to add the tape, you don't have to. And start pressing. The tip of the iron can push this metal piece, or you can just help it with your hand, and it's going to give us that fold. Now if we're going to add that fusible tape, so that fusible is now going to go in that top channel. So it's going to go right in, use a stiletto or a pin and get it right through that little hole. So now I have that paper and the fabric all lined up. This is all set. We're going to be able to slide this and have the iron go along so it gets folded and pressed and fused at the same time. Now I find if I can take this end and pin it over an edge, it really helps the starting. So I've taken my pins and they're out of the way of my iron. So you could do this on the edge of an ironing board, or in this case, I've used a wool mat. So I have everything lined up. I'm going to be able to just pull this unit and iron at the same time. And that's all there is. I just like to make sure that my fabric stays flat and my tape stays flat. So that fusible tape is now on that bias. Let's take a look at the 1/4 inch. I'm going to load it the same way. My tape is up at the top on that channel, paper side up. My fabric, I can see in that channel, is the right side. Slide that through and pull the fabric out. I can pin it on that edge and pull this back. Now if you don't want to use the tape, you can still use this maker just the way it is. I do like to press mine just a little bit to get it started, wrap it around an end so those pins are not getting in my way. And that fabric is going to fit in that channel and be pressed. As you're pressing, you can see that fabric folded right here in the top. And once you get that all started, just with a little bit of a motion, that tape is getting fused right onto the back side. And with that ability, we can do any fabric that we want. This was made with a straight of grain, and that's great if you need to do something straight and that it's not going to bend, because the straight of the grain doesn't really allow it to bend. I do have that fusible on there. It's really hard to turn those corners. You're going to get some wrinkles and it's harder to conform to that size. But the bias tape will bend quite nicely. This has the fusible on it, and I can bend it in many different shapes. The curves can be very gentle and they can be big curves, which I can't do that with the fabric cut on the straight of grain. Both techniques work well depending on the project you're going to use. Here is a bias maker that does not have that extra channel in the top for the fusible. But when we look at it, what we're having is this would be the 1 inch, and then we have those sides. So when the fabric goes in, you can see where that fabric needs to come up on the sides. If your fabric does not go in those side channels, it's just not going to fold properly. So when you do start, be sure to just take a peek inside and make sure you have this little bowl shape, that the fabric's coming up on the sides. And that goes for all of the bias makers. You can see the channel in that large 1 inch and in that little small 1/4 inch. So if you're working them, if for some reason the fabric is not coming out properly, be sure to check and make sure that it's sitting in those channels correctly. Another thing to look for is to make sure that you don't have too much fabric. If you have too much fabric, it will want to roll somewhere. It could roll in the center or roll on the sides. So you could have a little fold in it. So be sure to test a piece to make sure it's the right size. And if it's folding a little bit, you might need to trim it a little bit smaller. And that way it will go through without any wrinkles. You can see here where this is a little bit big. So for this piece, I do need to trim that piece down. And then it will go through nice and smooth. So we can buy it for garment constructions already made in packages. For quilting, this is a lot of fun, and making our own means that we can make it any size we want and use any fabric we want. And we can either use a fusible one or a non-fusible one. The whole key is making sure that the fabric is the right side, it fits inside that channel, and then off you go. There are so many different things that we can use bias tape for, and it's nice to have those options. And thank you for joining me today on So Very Easy. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and I do have a newsletter, all under So Very Easy. I'll put links in the description for you. And that's all there is to know about bias tape. Thanks for joining me. Bye for now.